Steve Sarkisian has done it again. The Texas Longhorns have the number one recruiting class in the country for 2025 after early signing day. We discuss on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns.
You are Locked On Longhorns, your daily podcast on the Texas Longhorns. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Longhorns, the show. Jonathan Davis, your host. Today's episode of Locked On Longhorns is brought to you by FanDuel. Get into the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. On today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, once again, your favorite football team, number one in the early signing or number one recruiting class after the early signing day. All right, number one recruiting class in 2025. We discussed that in the second segment. What would a SEC championship mean for the Texas Longhorns? And in the third segment, the women's basketball team and the men's basketball team both participated in the SEC ACC Challenge. Good news for the men, bad news for the women. We discussed on today's episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Steve Sarkisian and his staff have done it again. It's funny. It feels like every year we're worried about recruiting and why our class doesn't look like this and why we're not getting enough players. And, why has Texas had all of this success and yet we're still sitting at, 15th or whatever in the rankings. And then you look at it at the end and it's like Steve Sarkisian has done it again. And he always tells us, right, not to worry about recruiting in July or in August when it's crunch time, right? December. When it's crunch time in February, that's when we should be worried about it. And now when we look up Texas, with all the success they've had, it pays off once again with another recruiting class. 2025, they are sitting at number one in the rankings after early signing day. All 24 current Texas Longhorn commits have signed on the dotted line. And guess what? This team may not be done yet. So Sark just continues to recruit at a high level. And that is why he has built the program that you see before you today, right? Obviously he's a great football coach. He's built a great staff and they do such a good job of developing talent, right? But, you see some good football teams where it's like, oh, okay, they don't have the best players in the world, but they just find a way to win, right? Back-to-back 11-1 seasons for the Texas Longhorns, Big 12 championship last year, college football playoff appearance, now SEC championship appearance, and you're going to be in the college football playoffs. It helps to have really good players, right? We brought some really good players to the 40 acres. Now, of course, the University of Texas, just the brand it is, the state it's in, one of the best states to recruit in that produces some of the best football players in the world. Just the University of Texas period is somewhat going to recruit for itself, right? Even when Texas was going through a down period, we still had some of the best players in the country. But the combination of what Texas can offer now and what we've shown over the last few years, because, if you're a high school recruit, I think the three most important things to you, what order they're in, it's going to differ on the player. But I think the three most important things to a high school recruit at this point would be being able to make money, right? Being able to play games in college at the highest level and being able to be developed to get to the National Football League. And the University of Texas has proved over the last few years that they can offer all three of those to these high school recruits. You're going to make money at the University of Texas. You're going to get developed and have every chance to get to the National Football League. You're going to play in some of the biggest games in college football. And so that's why Steve Sarkisian has been able to build a monster, a juggernaut at the University of Texas, because he's been able to bring in some of the best players in the country repeatedly. And he's done it again with this 2025 class. So when you look at it, in 2021, didn't get a chance to bring in a full recruiting class, but he did bring in Xavier Worthy, right? One of the best receivers ever at the University of Texas, only the fastest receiver ever to run, fastest person, period, to ever run at the NFL Combine. And he's had a pretty solid, rookie season thus far with the Kansas City Chiefs. Was a big part of this Texas football team the last 3 years. In 2022, he brought in the 5th ranked class, and we've seen some players on this team, right now and last year that have had a huge impact from that class. Obviously, Kelvin Banks, who's an NFL football player, DJ Campbell, Cam Williams, 3 starters right now on that offensive line from that 2022 class alone. Ethan Burke, who's been great at the edge position for us. Obviously, Jaden Blue has made a ton of plays for us, our running back too. And then Jalen Gilbo, who's been absolutely exceptional this year at the star position on the best defense in the country. So that was the 2022 class. Then you go to 2023, right? Where, I mean, this is just in terms of star power and name and everything, one of the best classes I've ever seen. It's really crazy that this class was ranked third. Right. But you look at it, 2023, Steve Sarkisian was able to bring in the third ranked class in the country, obviously headlined by Archman, right? The crown jewel, your starting quarterback next year, a quarterback that came in and won a couple games for you this season, one of the most hyped, maybe the most hyped, most followed football recruit ever. Arch Manning obviously headlined that class. Anthony Hill, one of the best players in the country, period. Certainly one of the best defenders. Cedric Baxter, who was poised to have a huge breakout season this year, obviously dealt with tearing some ligaments in his knee in the offseason, but I think he'll be able to bounce back next year and be one of the best running backs in the country. Jelani McDonald, who stepped in, right? We've seen injuries to Andrew Makuba and then Derek Williams being out for the season. And Jelani McDonald has stepped in a huge way at that safety position and been really good for Texas. Had one of the best interceptions you'll ever see. I believe it was against Kentucky, right? And so Jelani McDonald playing some really good ball. Derek Williams, who he largely replaced at that safety position. We saw him come in right away as a true freshman and help lead this team to a Big 12 championship and then a college football playoff appearance. And he's going to come back next year even better. Hate to have lost him for the season in the Oklahoma game. Malik Muhammad, just a shutdown corner on the outside opposite of Jahdae Barron. You don't hear his name a lot because he's not getting targeted a lot. And when he does, he's making plays, right? So Malik Muhammad, really good corner out of South Oak Cliff. He's been great for us. DeAndre Moore, just making so many plays out of the slot and been a really good wide receiver. Trey Wisner, right, who we didn't expect to have a huge role, now looks like one of the best running backs in the country with the injury to Cedric Baxter and then the fumble issues by Jaden Blue. And then Jonte Cook. Jonte Cook has made a lot of plays for this Texas football team as well. Obviously, he's in the transfer portal now. It did not work out, but that's still a player that you brought in and at some points played at a high level for Texas. And then when you look at the 2024 class, right, the players that are true freshmen right now, we've seen players jump off our screen already, right? Colin Simmons, all-world, defensive prospect out of Duncanville High School, already taken over as a starter and, looks like one of the best young defensive players in the country. Certainly one of the best defensive players on this team and one of our best pass rushers, Ryan Wingo, who came out the gate swinging, right? I mean, this was a very, 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 very good freshman wide receiver class, and Ryan Wingo, one of the best, 5-star out of St. Louis. Kobe Black has gotten in some spots and made some plays. I believe he was the one that had a pick six against Vanderbilt that got called back on the targeting by Vernon Broughton, but he's came in and made some plays. And then Jared Gibson as our running back 3 with Christian Clark and Cedric Baxter hurt. He's been really good, better than you would expect as a true freshman. So Sark has done a masterful job of bringing in these highly rated players that have had a huge impact for this Texas football team over the last couple of years. Now you look at this 2025 class, who once again, number 1 as of early signing day. You look at some of the headliners, some of the big names who will be making plays on the 40 acres over the next 3 to 4 years. It starts with Jonah Williams, right? Number 6 player in the country, safety out of Galveston Ball, just super athletic defender, can play offense and defense, obviously at the high school level, but he's going to be a safety for us at Texas. Super excited to see him get on the field and make plays. You know what I mean? Just an NFL player, in my opinion, but, in a lot of people's opinion, he just looks like that. Just a playmaker. And, somebody who's going to add to now what we have, in terms of being elite on the back end, but you are going to lose Andrew Makuba and Michael Taft. I think Jonah Williams is somebody who can step in right away and be really good at that safety position and then eventually be elite and one of the best we've ever seen in the burnt orange and white. Khalid Lockett, right? Of course, we wish it was Decorium Moore, but Khalid Lockett, very good in his own right. Just everything you want to see from that wide receiver position out of Saxe, Texas, 6'2", 175, really good size. Like I said, route runner, speed, hands, attacking the ball at the catch point. Everything you want to see from a wide receiver, Khalid Lockett can do. Number 16 player in the country, Michael Terry. Very interesting, right? He's somewhat of the wild card, an athlete, just whatever you need him to do on offense, right? He can do. And I'm super excited to see Steve Sarkisian use him the way that he utilizes wide receivers in the rushing game. You could put him at running back. Obviously, you could put him at wide receiver. He gets polished a little bit more, 6'3", 217, just with that size and that athleticism. I mean, he has all the makings of a dog right at the University of Texas. Number 24 player in the country out of San Antonio. Cade Phillips, former Texas commit who ended up flipping to LSU and then rose a ton all the way up to a 5-star his senior year. We've seen, basically what LSU is kind of falling off a cliff, somewhat with Brian Kelly. And then, Texas just has a little bit more money to offer, right? Or offered a little bit more money than LSU did. And Cade Phillips out of Hightower, right back at the University of Texas, safety, number 37 player in the country. Lance Jackson, I can't wait to see him coming off the edge. We saw his brother Landon Jackson at Arkansas this year. He gave Texas a lot of trouble, and I believe Lance Jackson can bring that same type of firepower and that same type of grit and intensity to the edge position at the University of Texas. From Texarkana, 6'5", 260 pounds, number 38 player in the country. And then Jamie French. A lot of people were worried that he would end up staying in Florida. No, he signed on the dotted line. He's coming to the University of Texas out of Jacksonville, 6'1", 185, top 10 wide receiver in the country. I believe number 8, the number 48 player in the country. So the reason that Texas has had all of this success over the last couple of years is because they're bringing in some of the best players in the country and developing them to be some of the best players in college football. And now you have the number 1 class in the country in 2025 as of early signing day. And it looks like this dominance at Texas, this juggernaut that Steve Sarkisian has built, will only continue as scheduled when you're bringing in the type of players I just mentioned. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we get into what would an SEC championship mean for the Texas Longhorns this season. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by FanDuel. Get into the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're coming down to the end of the season because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the National Football League all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So that's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. All right, so Texas is poised to play in the SEC championship tomorrow against Georgia. If you're hearing this on Friday when it drops, if you're hearing it on Saturday, then they're poised to play today. And if you're hearing it on Sunday or beyond that, they've already played in the SEC championship game. But what would a win for Texas mean in the SEC championship game against the Georgia Bulldogs? I think the first thing it would mean is confirmation that you're the best team in the SEC, right? I think that in certain scenarios, you can look at a team and say, okay, they won the championship, which is just one game, but I'm not sure they were the best team in the conference. And I think even if Texas wins the SEC championship game on Saturday, there's going to be a lot of detractors that say that, oh, they weren't the best team in the conference just because of their schedule, or, they're going to get bounced in the playoffs, whatever. To my eye, and I could be biased, I could be, just a Texas fan, but to my eye, Texas has been over a 12-game stretch the best team in the SEC this season, right? I know when they played the best team on their schedule against Georgia at home, it did not go well, right? And Georgia doubled them up in points, and, that game, it just felt like Texas was shell-shocked. I understand that. I also understand, and I'm very self-aware, that in terms of our schedule, right, Texas did not have the toughest schedule in the conference. I get that. But when you look across the conference this year, and when you look at all the chaos ensued, why did none of that happen to Texas, right? We played Arkansas, who everybody wants to dog on, but Arkansas beat Tennessee. We played Florida, obviously without DJ Lagway, but DJ Lagway in Florida beat Ole Miss. We beat Kentucky. Kentucky beat Ole Miss. We beat Oklahoma very badly. Oklahoma beat Alabama. So when you look at it, and then you talk about Georgia, who did beat Texas, but this is a team that lost badly to Ole Miss, was down 28-0 to Alabama, right? They barely escaped with a win against Kentucky, and they should have lost to Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia easily could be an 8-4 football team. Over the course of 12 games, Texas has been the best team in the SEC, in my opinion. They've beaten everybody on their schedule they were supposed to beat. They only played one game in a win that was a one-possession game. Every other win they had was by 10 points or more. This Texas football team was dominant this season in every game but Vanderbilt and Georgia. What other SEC team can you say was dominant in the 10 of the 12 games they played? You can't say that about anybody else. So, to my eye, over the course of 12 games, Texas was the best team in the SEC. And if they win the SEC championship game on Saturday, it'll be confirmation that they were the best team in the conference from start to finish. The second thing it means is just practically a first round bye in the playoffs, right? I know that a lot of us are selfish, and I know a lot of us want to see Texas play at DKR in a playoff game for the first time ever. It would be exciting, it would be exhilarating, it would be dope. But we have to be realistic and we have to be smart about what is best for this Texas football team. And I know that, based on the way that, the bracket may go, you may say that, like, oh, well, if Texas loses, this would be their path against maybe some easier teams. Like maybe you play a Boise State and an Indiana, right? Instead of, winning the SEC championship game and then you end up playing, maybe a better team. To me, it's football. Anything can happen. It's the end of the season. Players are hurt. Players are tired. I mean, it's a war of attrition at this point, right? You have to take the path of winning 3 games to hoist the trophy rather than 4. I don't care what the bracket may potentially look like. You have to value the first round bye. You have to go into the playoffs with the mindset that you only have to win 3 games to win a championship rather than 4. I don't care who the opponent is. Stranger things have happened. I don't care if it's Indiana. I don't care if it's SMU. I don't care if it's Boise State, right? I don't care if it's whoever that you think we can just roll over in DKR. 3 games to 4 games for the same result. It's football. Give me 3 games, right? I mean, anything can happen. Seriously. Would it be dope to have a playoff game in Austin? Of course. But we don't want to do that because we want to win the SEC championship. We want to hoist trophies, right? We want to win championships. That's what we all should want as Texas fans. And we want to win a national championship. And if you win on Saturday, you only have to win 3 games to do that rather than 4. If Texas wins the SEC championship on Saturday, to me, it should end all the debate about the Texas schedule this year, their SEC schedule this year. Because I guess the reason that people are still arguing or, still going on this tangent about the schedule is because they're trying to say that Texas isn't proven, right? And I think you can look at everything that Texas has done this year. You can look at the body of work and say, this is a damn good football team. I don't really think there should be any argument about that. But of course, it's Texas, so there is still a bunch of argument about that. And then the argument is that when they play Georgia, right, the one playoff level team on their schedule, it did not go well. So if Texas comes back and beats Georgia in a bigger game in Atlanta with all the chips in the middle of the table, what can you say about their schedule then? Because obviously at that point, Texas has proven that they can beat the best teams in the country by beating Georgia. And there's this assumption that if Texas had Tennessee or Alabama or South Carolina or Ole Miss on their schedule, that those would be losses. Like, they don't have to play Texas too. Like, yeah, you could have put Ole Miss on our schedule and we'd probably beat Ole Miss. We'd beat South Carolina. We beat Tennessee. We beat Alabama like we did last year. So where is this assumption coming from that Texas was only able to beat Arkansas or Kentucky or Florida or Mississippi State? Like, yeah, you could have put Ole Miss on our schedule. You could have put LSU on our schedule. South Carolina, whatever. We weren't running. They got to play Texas too. And they were probably going to lose. So if Texas beats Georgia on Saturday, all that schedule talk is nonsense at this point. Because deep down, and you're hiding behind it, not you, Texas fan, but the detractors, they're hiding behind this schedule as if Texas isn't a good football team. But what you going to say when they beat Georgia on Saturday in Atlanta? What you going to say then? Exactly. We're going to shut that schedule talk up. And then the last thing is, it validates every move that Steve Sarkisian and this administration have made since 2021. When Steve Sarkisian came in, of course, he was putting one foot in front of the other, right? Of course, you're trying to build a good football team. You're trying to win the Big 12 in 2021. And then 2022, and then 2023. But we also heard when he came in, he asked the question, why do we have more scholarship wide receivers than offensive linemen? I'll continue to repeat that as long as I can, as long as I'm hosting Locked On Longhorns, right? When Steve Sarkisian came in from day one, when this administration brought Steve Sarkisian in from day one, the goal was to create a program and create a football team that could perform at a high level when they got to the SEC, right? We want to win now in the Big 12, but we want to be ready in 2024 and hit the ground running when we get to the SEC. If they win the SEC championship, I think they've already validated, right, that this is a SEC, level football team, that this team is ready to compete in the SEC. I think they've already validated that. But in terms of on a national level, if Texas wins the SEC in the first year, then we can officially say that over the last 3 years, Steve Sarkisian has built one of the best programs in college football and has built the best program and football team in 2024 and moving forward. I know what Georgia did in 2021 and 2022, but Steve Sarkisian has built the best football team and program in the SEC moving forward, right? And that started with everything he did in 2021, and we're seeing the work culminate and pay off right now in 2024 and beyond. Quick word from our sponsors, and I get into the basketball. SEC ACC Challenge. Good news for the men, bad news for the women. All right, today's episode of Locked On Longhorns brought to you by Mint Mobile. I love a great deal as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. Turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. There you'll see that right now all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months of premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. That's mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedoncollege. $45 upfront payment required, which is equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speeds slower above 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. All right, so now talking about the men and the women in the SEC ACC Challenge. I always love these challenges. These teams getting a chance to play some of the other big teams and some of the other big conferences, in true home environments, right? Whether it's in, the ACC home team, whether the ACC team is the home team or the SEC team is the home team. I think they do a good job of balancing it. They do a good job of, presenting some of the best matchups. And we've seen some really good basketball over the last week on the men and women's side. We're going to start with the men, right, who are now 7-1 ahead of a big matchup on Sunday against UConn. They beat NC State at NC State 63-59. What I love about this Texas basketball team is they've showed so much resolve in their big games thus far. Obviously, against Ohio State pretty much led wire to wire. They weren't able to come back and win that game, but they did show a ton of fight at the end, right? They didn't just get rolled over on. They just couldn't make enough baskets, especially without Tremont Mark, to beat that Ohio State team. And Ohio State was just unconscious from the 3-point line. I think they shot 50%, if I can remember. And then against Syracuse, all right, they're beating Syracuse by 16 points. Syracuse, rallies back all the way to take a lead. And it's like, okay, Texas is crumbling. And then they find a way to win down the stretch and take control of that game. And the same thing against NC State, right? They never had a huge lead, but they definitely were winning against NC State and felt like if they could just continue to play their basketball, they would win the game. Then NC State got hot. The crowd got into it. And next thing you know, NC State is leading 51-47 with 9:30 left, right? From that point on, Texas outscored them 16-8 down the stretch. So another game that was in the balance, another game that could go either way. And Ronnie Terry's squad found a way to gut out a victory in a tough road environment at NC State. Trey Johnson, the super freshman, the diaper dandy, right? As Dick Vitale would call him, 18 points. Arthur Kaluma struggled from the field, 3 for 11, but did give you 8 points and 15 rebounds. Jordan Pope and Tremont Mark, who is now back in the starting lineup, combined for 23 points. They were huge. And then Caden Shedrick, a huge block at the end to secure the victory, which led to a Kendall Weaver dunk to put the exclamation point on it. So like I said, they play UConn on Sunday, but I love the resolve. And I love the fight we've seen at the end of the game. I love the way they've closed their last couple of games in big moments against Syracuse and NC State. And we'll see what happens against UConn on Sunday in the Moody Center. And the women, they suffered their first loss of the season, number 4 team in the country. They were 7-0 at this point, but playing against a really good Notre Dame team who had already lost 2 games, but getting hot, right? They got their second straight top 5 win. Unfortunately, it came against our Texas Longhorns, 80-70 in overtime. Texas only scored 2 points in overtime, while Notre Dame scored 12. That is an issue when you look at it. Texas, 37, 33, 73 splits, right? 37% from the field, 33% from the three-point line. They shot 24 threes, which was uncharacteristic, even though the game did go to overtime. And then 73% from the free throw line, right? So they just weren't great shooting the ball at all. We're not able to get the ball into the paint like they normally do and dominate down there. And then they turn the ball over a lot. Right, they turn the ball over a lot, and so obviously that's a recipe for a Notre Dame team to get a huge win at home. And Notre Dame only played 6 players, but those 6 players really showed up and showed out. I mean, Hannah Hidalgo, just special. Maybe the best game of her young career thus far. 30 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals. Absolute dog on the court last night. Olivia Miles, 18 points and 6 assists, and then Sonia Citrone, 18 points, 7 rebounds, 7 steals. So they get a huge win at home against Texas, hand them their first loss of the season. This is a really good Notre Dame team, a team that's going to, probably go far in the NCAA tournament. And this doesn't change anything about this Texas basketball team for me. Still one of the best teams in the country, still a national championship contender. Just had an off night, like I said, against another team that's going to make a lot of noise in the NCAA tournament. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Longhorns, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Beat Georgia. Hook 'em. Peace.